Howdy doody KliqPodcast peeps. This is Mean Dean back with Mean Dean's A through Z pay-per-view review. Goddamn, it feels good to be back. Today we are reviewing ECW's Barely Legal 1997. This is the only Barely Legal pay-per-view in existence, and it is the very first ECW pay-per-view period. So definitely have a special feeling on this one. Want to cover this, but before I do, let you guys know that we are on Podomatic, Stitcher, iTunes, YouTube. My man JG is always holding it down on YouTube with Monday Night Raw, Tuesday Night SmackDown Live reviews, as well as Twitch. We're now on Twitch. Go check us out. I'm always randomly putting up videos. JG's always randomly putting up videos. We just have fun. It's not always wrestling related, but it's fun, man. Just go check KliqPod Gaming out. Of course, our website, kliqpod.weebly.com, and the Kliq Podcast, Facebook and Twitter. Check it out, mofocos. Couple things to note early on this pay-per-view, ECW Barely Legal 1997. Dudleys first start off by interrupting Joey Styles. Fans immediately chant, "Fuck you, Devon." Now, what's weird about this is I have my son sitting next to me, and he was just kind of like dumbfounded by the whole situation. He was very confused because normally you don't hear things like this anymore, really. So I just had to sit back and tell him, like, hey, kid, it was just a different time. You're green in terms of being a wrestling fan. Let me get you to that next level. Now you just heard people chant, "Fuck you" to Devon. There you go. You're starting it off, kid. And also the other part of note is that the ECW tag titles look just a little bit like the WWE Intercontinental title, or at that time, WWF Intercontinental title. So I thought that was something cool to note. First match, the Dudleys versus the Eliminators for the tag team titles. The Dudleys were great back then. You gotta love early Dudleys. But the other part too, and a lot of people forget about the Eliminators. Not a lot of people forget about Perry Saturn because he was a part of it, and he's the one to go on and move on and do bigger and better things and then fall like every other wrestler around that time with drugs and alcohol. But I have to say, Perry Saturn and the Eliminators, they did things on this pay-per-view in a tag match that I have still not seen to today. I still haven't seen some of the moves they've done, either recreated or replicated. It's just the high flying, and I mean, I think there's one point where it looked like one of the Eliminators was going to hoist up the other, and instead pushed them and did a backflip over the rope, and they were doing backflips. They were doing kicks. They were doing double kicks. It was basically the Young Bucks back then. They were the Young Bucks of that generation, really. They were just putting on a show. I mean, just incredible, incredible work. And then, of course, one of my favorite tag team finishers of all time, the total fucking elimination. One sweeps a kick down at the feet. One kicks up at the top. Topple over. New tag team champions, the Eliminators. That was an amazing start to that pay-per-view, and it really got me fired up for Barely Legal 1997. Candido came out and decided to run a promo. Now, he was scheduled to fight on this card. The problem was he tore his bicep, essentially. And when you see Chris Candido get heated, it's really funny because he almost sounds like that neighbor of yours in a really suburban area that just wants you to turn your music down, and they're screaming so loud their pitch is starting to hit a high note. And Candido basically was basically shitting on all of ECW, essentially. He told the fans that Sandman was shit because Singapore was shit and he carries Singapore's cane. It was just crazy. That fucking guy, Candido. I mean, rest in peace. He was a good wrestler. He was a decent talent. He fucked Sonny for a long time. That's just a stand-up guy right there. Match number 2, Lance Storm versus RVD. Lance Storm, this is really green Lance Storm. This is early Lance Storm. So much so that Lance Storm was sporting a gnarly fucking rat tail that was dyed 2 different colors. Thank you. 1997. Actually, 97 was my favorite year in wrestling in all of history, which we'll talk about at the WrestleMania pre-show. There's just some great inside technical work right off the bat. And what else would you expect from two guys like Lance Storm and Rob Van Dam? You know, Storm looking a little green still, even though he was at that time. He was still putting in his time. He was still getting things kicked in for his career, and it just, he was off a little bit, but for the most part, he was doing all right. RVD missed a Van Daminator and got tagged with a weak-ass chair shot. I'm telling you, Lance Storm put maybe 10% of his strength into this chair shot, and people were like, oh, maybe he's injured or something, and they were starting to boo, but they kind of let it go. Then he throws another fucking weak chair shot. And then the fans just are all over him. This is early ECW fans. By early, I mean 97. That's not super early, but that's prime ECW fans just letting Lance Storm fucking have it because of these chair shots. It was awesome. Van Dam missed a springboard, and the fans also lit Van Dam up. Van Dam is one of the greatest in-ring performers of all time. Not necessarily great wrestlers, but definitely in-ring performers. And when he missed that springboard, they were just chanting loud as hell that you fucked up. Again, super fucking awesome. Van Daminator, winner, RVD. It was pretty sweet. And then afterwards, and you may have caught this on top 10s on WWE.com or What Culture or what have you. No pun intended. And it was that RVD cut a promo in ECW talking about basically just selling out for more money. And that was the pay-per-view that he did it at. Afterwards, he said that he wasn't even going to wrestle and that he was basically putting this match to make Lance Storm look good. And he said, I decided to do business because it makes me worth more money here and it makes me worth more money elsewhere. Rob Van Dam's a smart fucking guy. And he absolutely went elsewhere, and he was absolutely successful elsewhere. So, as far as I'm concerned, RVD, one of the top performers of all time. Then, Joey Styles comes up and says, now we're going to go to something different. And he says something about Michinoku Pro Wrestling. For those people who've actually watched wrestling in the mid-90s, mid to late 90s, you'll know that Taka Michinoku is a great Japanese wrestler. First ever light heavyweight champion in WWE all time. Suspiciously, maybe the only light heavyweight champion in WWE history. I don't really remember anybody else. Maybe Funaki, maybe Crash Holly, I'm not sure. And before Michinoku went to WWE, he did wrestle a little bit in ECW, but he had his own Japanese wrestling promotion called Michinoku Pro Wrestling. And out of that pro wrestling promotion, they were going to have 6 guys from there compete in ECW. It was rough start at first because it is a different style of wrestling. Lucha fits very well in a place like ECW early, and Lucha fits also very well in a place like WWE, even though they didn't capitalize on that market because of what their fans want to see. So the match that came out of Michinoku Pro Wrestling was Great Sasuke, Gran Hamada, Gran Ninawa versus Terry Boy, Dick Togo, and Taka Michinoku. Immediately I'm like, okay, well, this isn't really going to fit within the ECW brand because Japanese wrestling is more of a sport. ECW is more of a show. So we'll see what happens. Great start, though. Honestly, I was really impressed. And Joey Styles did make it clear that it was a mix of Lucha Libre wrestling and Japanese wrestling. So it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. And these guys, man, with their backflips and their jumping off the top ropes, just super, super crisp. Probably some of the best backflips I've ever seen. Just landed perfectly, no harm to the other competitor. Just pure showmanship. And I also thought it was really funny, and this is just a side note to the match. There were some chops, some chest chops, and of course, if you're any sort of wrestling fan, you're listening to this, you would know that if somebody gets a chest chop, we're going to get a Ric Flair woo coming up, right? Okay, so chest chop, chest chop, chest chop, woo! All of a sudden, ECW fans are wooing. And for a fan base that prides themselves on being hardcore and different and against the mainstream, they're like, fucking awesome, bro. We have cheese graters and New Jack who kills people. They still woo and worship the mainstream legends. It was just kind of funny to me. I thought that was a great side note. The chemistry between these guys, just to get back to the match, is really, really good. 6 guys, all great chemistry. They probably knew exactly what they were doing going in. It was really good. And somehow they pulled off a Shield powerbomb. And Taka Michinoku was right in the middle doing the Roman Reigns thing. It was pretty cool. And then there's this middle rope moonsault as well, I believe from Hamada, that went just all the way back into the crowd. It was fucking amazing looking. Winner, Sasuke, Hamada, and Inoue. There you go. That was the match. It wasn't a bad addition to what we had already seen with the tag team match and RVD's versus Lance Storm. Really, this pay-per-view has been built up to be what it was, which was supposed to be just an amazing pay-per-view. And so far, up to this point, it has been. Steven Richards is cutting a promo, an emotional promo. Basically talking about he's not supposed to be here. This is his life. He's usually the guy who's basically getting shit on and whatever. I mean, it's Steven Richards, Dr. Richards, Stevie, whatever the fuck you want to call him. I'm not a fan of Steven Richards, clearly. But what was really funny is to add production value for ECW, they had ran very royalty-free, generic, cheesy rock music behind his promo. The problem with that is you could not hear a fucking word Steven Richards said. It was amazing. Moving on. Match number 4, Shane Douglas versus Pitbull 2 for the TV title. For those of you who've seen me on Twitch, for those of you who have listened to all my Mean Dean A through Z pay-per-views, who have heard me and JG and Tommy Guns talk about the TV title, that's an amazing title. Always needs to be brought back. Not sure why Vince is not fucking convinced that we need a TV title. Give the TV title to NXT. You got 1 fucking hour to fill, and you have a title to defend. Writes itself, right? And of course, Shane Douglas, being one of the proprietors of the Extreme Movement, taking a piss on that NWA World Championship when it was Eastern Championship Wrestling, and it became something else. So Shane Douglas, pivotal in the ECW history, and then Pitbull 2, if I'm not mistaken, both Pitbulls are dead. I don't know. I know what Pitbull 1 looks like. I've already seen this pay-per-view, but I've already forgotten what Pitbull 2 looks like. It's kind of weird because it was like rock music for Pitbull 2, and as soon as Pitbull came out, they started fighting, and the music was going on for at least a minute afterwards. So some sort of recording snafu, because I know for a fucking fact that they're not New Jacking this whole fucking thing and just going to play his music over the whole match. That's New Jack's thing. If there's one thing I'll give to New Jack is the fact that, yes, you stab people, you kill people, you give herpes to Terry Reynolds, but guess what? Your music being played over you basically brutalizing everybody is probably one of the coolest things of your character. Boom. You're welcome, New Jack. I honestly think that Shane Douglas is an underrated performer. Not necessarily athletically, but character-wise, I thought he was a great character everywhere he went, with the exception of some of his early shit. The fact that he could pull a promo out of his ass, like he did when he did shit on the NWA World Heavyweight title, just shows his range as a character, and I thought it needed to be used more. Shane actually had a guardrail in the ring and threw it from the ring to the floor onto Pitbull. It looked like it fucking hurt, really. But honestly, it was a run-of-the-mill match. It wasn't bad, but not very noteworthy. Not a lot of noteworthy scenes in this case. The winner, Shane Douglas. Keep moving on here at ECW 1997, Barely Legal. Guy named Bulldog Lee. I don't know if you guys know him. Bulldog Lee came out in a lucha mask. Moving on. Match number 5. The most anticipated match of this night up to that point was Tazz versus Sabu. Because of the history they had where Sabu basically no-showed. Paulie shit on Sabu. There was some injuries. There were yada, 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 yada. This was supposed to be the match of the century. It was a great match, but it sort of let me down a little bit just because I had even higher expectations based on knowing what the storyline was. And really just most of the matches beating the shit out of each other. I mean, they're really going toe-to-toe. It's actually really cool to see. And Tazz is just hitting disgusting suplexes. I mean, suplexes you couldn't even dream of doing. I'll sit here and play with wrestlers, action figures. We're sitting here with my son. I can come up with shit, but I guarantee you Tazz did it better. And different. And better. Sabu puts a Tazz mission on Tazz, but god damn it, if it wasn't for Tazz and him being one of the most badass wrestlers of all time, he snuck out of it. Tazz mission on Sabu, winner. Tasmania. This is like called the Tasmanian early. Tazz shows his respect to Sabu, saying, you took me to the limit. I want to do this again. I want you to wrestle me again. You just tell me when. RVD and Sabu just beat the shit out of Tazz. I mean, that's the heel turn. That's like basically your heel turn. Match number 6, and this is a lead up to the final match. Stevie Richards versus Sandman versus Terry Funk for the number 1 contendership. After this match, the person who wins is going to fight Raven, who is the world champion. Terry Funk hits a moonsault from the top of the ladder at nearly 60 years old. Terry Funk, one of the most hardcore motherfuckers ever in wrestling. I don't care what we say about New Jack. I don't care what we say about Foley. I don't care about a lot of things. It was a verdict that Terry Funk was wrestling at a higher risk rate with no regard to his body at a much older age and doing it better than some of the young guys. Take note of that shit, newbies. Sandman took a nasty bump off the ladder onto the ropes. It almost looked like he got kind of tangled up in there. Poor Sandman. Singapore, the country, is shit, right, buddy? A lot of ladder intervention in a non-ladder match. That's partly noteworthy. I know we're ECW Extreme Championship Wrestling, but there's just a shitload of ladders in this match. Barbed wire moonsault. So basically Sandman wrapped himself in barbed wire. Terry Funk got up on the top rope, did a moonsault onto Sandman. Terry Funk's the winner. It was fucking brutal. Let me make note here too, just for the sake of saying it and really putting Terry over again. This is 1997. Terry's, 50, late 50s, almost over 60, something like that. I think he might be close to 60. Fast forward, let's see, 9 years after that. 9 years. And he is doing the exact same thing at ECW One Night Stand, 2006, which I cannot fucking wait to get to. Terry Funk, arguably the baddest motherfucker in wrestling, period. Match number 7 in the final match, Raven versus Terry Funk for the world title. Dreamer's doing a lot of commentary, and he's just not good at it. I mean, especially at that time when he's trying to run his persona. Sorry, Dreamer, you're a great guy. He told Joey Styles, like, hey, Joey, I know I'm out here commentating, but just leave me alone. And Joey's like, oh, noted. And I'm like, what? But you're supposed to be talking, Tommy. Then Raven and Tommy sort of getting a shouting match across the way. Tommy's up on that big, I don't know, it was like a second floor missing wall type thing where they did their commentary, and Raven is in the ring. Well, he's telling Raven to come in, but that big fucking Dudley, and I cannot remember his name, the guy who rolled with the Dudley boys at that time, came out, chokeslammed him through 3 tables, missed the chokeslam. So basically Dreamer just jumped backwards into a bunch of tables. And then that distracted Raven enough to let Terry get some momentum. Then Dreamer actually went out there and distracted officially. Terry Funk got that dub. He is a new ECW champion at nearly 60 fucking years old. How incredible is that? Oi, love Terry Funk. And that is it for me, Mean Dean, with Mean Dean's A through Z pay-per-view review. Do not forget to check us out. WrestleMania Live pre-show, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube. me and JG together after 8 months. Don't call it a fucking comeback. But also check us out on Twitch, Spreaker, Stitcher, Podomatic, iTunes. Woo! Everything. You motherfuckers have a good time now.